Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits, keeping you informed on all that's going on in the sports game. And if you don't know by now, you'll be reminded who's delivering it by name, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with Joe's JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And yeah, somebody with a motorcycle outside, so if you heard that in the microphone, my apologies. But anyway, with that being said, lots to get into. Yeah, the sports world is actually percolating a little bit, even during this slow sports period, the sports dead zone 2.0, as I like to call it. And obviously baseball, front and center, on and popping, the whole nine. And I know I talked about them on Thursday's pod, and I'll talk about them a little bit because obviously it ties into my favorite baseball team, which I really don't want to get into, but I have to. But I want to start off with what's happening in the Pacific Northwest, because we are seeing a team that may be riding the wave. And what I mean by that, for the good start that the Seattle Mariners had in their season, and then when you got to around Memorial Day, into June, July, and so on and so forth, you kind of thought to yourself that, Seattle's now petering out. They're not showing the team that a lot of people thought that they could be, making some noise in the American League, let alone the AL West. And when the Astros went by them standing still, and it was a situation where it seemed to be desperation there in Seattle, to where they finally made some moves, bringing in Josh Naylor. We know about Eugenio Suarez and the like, and we know about that pitching staff. Well, now it seems like it's all shaping and coming together, because the Mariners are now currently on a 7-game winning streak. And I understand it's not as if they're beating the big teams in the sport. They just come off of beating the Rays and the White Sox. And all right, you're going to look at that and say, well, JAYREELZ, come back to me when they beat a real, a big team. But at the same time, you're only going to play the teams that are in front of you. And if you don't do the damage against those teams, then people are going to think of you as a laughing stock to say, well, this team is supposed to be big time come October, or big time down the stretch of a baseball season, and they can't even beat the lowly teams in the sport. Well, you can't say that right now for the Mariners, as right now things to be clicking on all cylinders, as not only the pitching, but also the hitting is coming together. Cal Raleigh now with 45 home runs. The number retirement for one Ichiro Suzuki, where you had Randy Johnson go, and Johnson flashing the 5 and Ichiro the 1, because remember, Randy Johnson prior to Ichiro wore the number 51. So you have a lot going on in Seattle, the camaraderie, the feeling, everything is just coming up roses in Seattle. And mind you, it's only August 11th, so we cannot all of a sudden put them into the World Series, as a lot of people may look to see as a sleeper, or even a team that is on the come up, similar to what we saw last year with the Tigers, as they had that torrid stretch at the end of the year, getting into the postseason, winning a wild card round, and then pushing the Guardians to the brink there in a division series. Now, my crystal ball does not say that with the Mariners. In fact, there's a part of me that doesn't trust them, despite the fact that they're playing as good as they have all year, to the point where now they're actually a half game behind the Houston Astros in the AL West, where they were probably, 4 games as early as 2 weeks ago. So they made up some ground, even with the Astros winning 2 out of 3 in the Bronx over the weekend against the Yankees. The Mariners, with this winning streak and with them playing as well as they have, now have started to put the proverbial, I don't want to say fingers around the Astros' neck, because they're still behind them, but it's a situation where they're certainly breathing down their necks, knowing that the division is certainly in play here for a Mariner team that, if they play well the rest of the way and somehow get to October as division champs, they will not only host the series, but quite possibly could be a situation where they could fall in the top 2, where they'll have a bye heading into October and not have to worry about the wild card. So you have that going on with Seattle and the Mariners, and we'll certainly keep our eyes on them. But with them combined with the Brewers, who are also in a winning streak in their own right, and we talked about this on Thursday's podcast, how they've just been beating up everybody, from the Dodgers, sweeping them 6-0 throughout the entire 2 games in the 2 series that they played against one another, to them beating up on teams like the Nationals, and now we could throw the Mets in there as well, as they swept them in pretty much dramatic fashion over the weekend. Friday night, with the game hanging in the balance, 3-2 ninth inning, Jeff McNeil base hit into center field, and Blake Perkins throws a bullet to home plate to get Starling Marte out to end it in a walk-off win. And not really a walk-off when you think about it, but they closed the game out in just grand fashion, getting a play at the plate, tying run, gets tagged out, and the Brewers win 3-2 in another excruciating loss for the Mets. And then, with them winning on Saturday to see if they could go ahead and sweep the Mets, Pete Alonso, who has tied Darryl Strawberry all-time franchise leader in home runs at this very moment, and even he was not able to provide enough offense considering that they had a 5-0 lead, 6-3, and then they spit the bit there later on where they gave up a run in the 8th to tie, and obviously the game winner, a walk-off home run off of Edwin Diaz. So now he had to throw his hat in the ring as far as relievers imploding wearing blue and orange, and more on the Mets in a second. But for the Brewers, now they won 9 in a row. They already had the best record in the sport when we met on Thursday. Obviously, they still have that best record considering they're now 73-44. They're almost 30 games over 500. And just like I said on Thursday, which I kind of will say now, but I'll also now bring in the Mariners to this point, are these two teams here in almost the middle of August, are they peaking too early? And it's a situation where you have to ask yourself that. Now, I understand the Mariners have gotten their footing and maybe they could ride this sucker into September and fight for a division going into the latter part of next month, where the Brewers right now, I'm not going to say they could put their feet up, but they currently do have enough of a cushion, 6 games in the NL Central, for them to just kind of exhale, considering that they were 13 games they made up in the standings between Memorial Day when they were 27-28, and since then they've just been on a stretch that is almost unheard of. They are now, if I do my math correctly off the top of my head, they are, since that time, 48-24, because they are currently what? Let's see if I got that correct. They were no, I take that back. They are 45-16. So yes, my math was incorrect. My apologies. So to think, in the last 61 games, they have just been on a clip that we haven't seen in quite some time. Now, what does this mean as we get to October? There's still a lot of baseball to be played. Hopefully no injuries occur on both sides, whether you're in Milwaukee or Seattle. And a lot of people are going to think when they wake up this morning, and of course you already have awoken, considering by the time that this is going to get posted, it's mid-afternoon. But now that you've had your breakfast and maybe even your lunch, and who knows, by the time you listen to this, maybe dinner or the following day, etc. But a lot of people are going to think, are these two teams destined to meet in the World Series in late October? I definitely will not go as far as saying that, because I cannot trust the Brewers as far as I could throw them based on their recent playoff history, as I talked about on Thursday's podcast. And people could say, well, does their recent playoff history have anything to do with 2025? You're right, I'll give you that. But with that being said, a lot of that bad juju just going back to last year. Devin Williams, who's not on the team anymore, Pete Alonso, the home run, and losing a Game 7 in their building in 2018 in the NLCS, in the championship series against the Dodgers. The error by Trent Grisham in the wild card game against the Washington Nationals, where the ball went all the way to the wall and Josh Hader had to blow that game. That was not his fault. And then you had 2 years after that in Atlanta, where Freddie Freeman took Hader deep to close out the Brewers in that round where they had the home field advantage, and that was a division series. So we could talk about all these performances where they have fallen short. And right, is that going to translate to 2025? I can't guarantee that, but what I can guarantee is that, is this a team that you could trust come October? I can't say that. There are no lock in my eyes. To me, they're more built for the regular season, and when they get to October, it's going to be a whole different animal. But again, you have to go back to that podcast to really get a better feel as to where it is I'm coming from for the Milwaukee Brewers. And you could say the same for the Seattle Mariners. This is a team that's never made it to a World Series. This is a team that it's at its height has gone to a championship series, which I believe was back in, off the top of my head, 2001. The last time when Ichiro Suzuki was a rookie, where he started his Hall of Fame career and got his number retired there at T-Mobile Park, to where they got blasted by the Yankees in 5 games after a record-setting 116-46 regular season. So Right, what does 2001 have to do with 2025? Nothing, but Seattle has to get over that hump. And to me, even with their young pitching staff and even with the guys that they imported at the trade deadline, I'm not going to automatically think that, oh, this team's going to have a red carpet to a World Series appearance. I can't, because that young staff doesn't know what it takes to be in pressure situations. Same for even the bats in that lineup. And that's not to say you have to have a world of experience or you have to have so much playoff maneuverability where you've been in a lot of these series. And Seattle has been in the playoffs over the last few years. They lost to Houston, as you know, in the wild card round. Yes, they did beat Toronto in that 2-game series back in 2022, but then failed to beat the Astros right after that. So it's not as if they don't know their way around it. Granted, that was a few years ago, but still, I'm going to pose the question once again. Do you trust Seattle in the postseason if it started tomorrow? You know what the answer is to that. And yes, you can say that for a lot of teams. Understood. Maybe not the Dodgers, considering they're the defending world champs, but at least you know teams that have been around the block, whether it's the Dodgers, whether it's the Mets, whether it's the Phillies, whether it's the Yankees, whether it's even to a lesser degree the Tigers. We know the Astros have been in the postseason, it seems to be forever. You would trust those teams more than you would trust the aforementioned Brewers and Mariners, wouldn't you? And that's why I bring the question back to, are they peaking too early? And I understand that is a tough question to answer because where you want to peak is in October. But because they've had all the success here, whether it's Milwaukee running away with the best record in the sport, or the Mariners moving up the division rankings to be that close to the Houston Astros, and you could say, wow, these two teams look like they're going to be on a run to get to October and maybe even go deep. Yeah, we could say that now, and that's fodder for sports talk, but am I automatically going to think that these two teams are going to be destined to meet each other in the Fall Classic? I'm not going to say that. Far from it. And with these teams peaking right now, I get it. This is the time that they're playing in. You can't look that far ahead to think that, oh, are they peaking too early? Or it's a situation where they're playing their best baseball now that they're going to falter here toward the end of the month or early September or the middle or latter part of September where they may not even make it to the postseason. More so on Seattle's side than Milwaukee, because Milwaukee right now, they look to be a shoo-in to make it into the postseason. But this is what I'm talking about. I feel like teams, when they peak now, it's almost as if they're on this high to when they come back to the pack a little bit, try to get that good feeling, those good vibrations back to the point where you're going to go off on another 7-game winning streak, or you're going to win 12 out of 15, or you're going to just keep winning series at a clip to the point where you're going to surpass teams in the division or continue to stay at the top of the National League the way the Milwaukee Brewers are right now. Yeah, all that's well and good right this very moment, but we know that there's going to be a storm on the way, whether it is in the Pacific Northwest or somewhere in the Cream City. So how I look at it right this very minute, World Series matchup as constituted with the hottest teams in the sport? But have they also peaked too soon? You could say that, yes, absolutely, because there's still 6 weeks of baseball to be played. But until we get to October, where they're really going to be graded, where they're really going to be scrutinized, that's when we're going to see whether or not they're going to peak or not. So we'll certainly keep our eyes peeled to see how this is all going to unfold down the stretch. But what could you say? Brewers Mariners have just played out of their gourd, and I still can't believe how fantastic the Brewers, and they're doing it in so many different ways. Obviously with their defense, with their pitching, etc. And last night, or yesterday afternoon, when they were down 5-0 and 6-3, they came back to win the game in dramatic fashion. Now, do I have to get on the flip side of this? I need a sip of water after that. But for the bad and maybe even the ugly, the New York baseball teams, right now, they're both on the same ship, and the leaks have sprung big time. And how they're filling these leaks on the fly at this very moment, I couldn't even come up with a recipe as to how they're going to do that. I'll start off with the Yankees real quick because at least they've won a couple of games where the Mets seems like they haven't won in a month. But for the Yankees, who you had the feeling that coming into the series against the Astros, after winning that final game in Texas, that if they came away with winning 2 out of 3, you'd feel better knowing that you'd have a series win under your belt after that disastrous road trip in Miami and Texas. And the Astros, your longtime playoff nemesis, that if you were to at least take a series from them, that's something that you could build on. Now, mind you, the Twins are coming to town, so if the Yankees can't cure their ills against Minnesota, then there's going to be no hope for this team at all. So I would think they're going to, at minimum, at least win 2 games, and I wouldn't be shocked if they sweep. But that's for later on in the week. But as for right now, Friday night, if you're Aaron Boone, I think he wants to get fired. Because how do you put Devin Williams in that situation, 10th inning with the game tied, is beyond me. We saw what happened in Texas early in the week. He blew those 2 games. You can't put him in that type of situation to where either the game is tied or up or down by a run. As it was yesterday when the game was getting out of hand, Max Fried, who now all of a sudden is just not the same pitcher that you saw in the first 2.5 months of the year. But Devin Williams comes in the 6th inning after Max Fried goes 5 innings, very pedestrian, actually not so good. 4 runs, 8 hits, a walk, and 3 strikeouts. Devin Williams, what does he do? He comes in the 6th inning and not only strikes out the side, he does it in 11 pitches, 10 strikes, and now it's almost as if the Yankee fans saying, where was this Friday night? Where was this last Monday and Tuesday in Texas? Of course, there's no pressure on him, so therefore, voila! He's looking like the guy that was the best reliever in baseball a year ago. So for Aaron Boone to not get it, to not take the temperature of his team, and I understand he probably wants to throw Devin Williams back out there just to regain some confidence, but how can you put him in a spot where he's just destined to implode? I mean, you can't make it up. That's why I'm thinking Aaron Boone probably wants to get fired or go on an early vacation because he still has a couple of years left after he got re-signed, and the Yankee brass will not fire Aaron Boone for the life of them. And unless they lose every game remaining on the schedule from here on out, then they have no choice but to fire him. But you know that's not going to be the case. But the Yankees right now, with the Twins coming in, and with a series that they can actually, absolutely, positively, should have no business losing. Because remember, the Twins' their fire sale at the trade deadline was one that we haven't seen in quite some time. They had 10 different trades at the deadline. So let's see what happens here, because if I come back here on Thursday, and I believe that series starts tomorrow, because I know both the Mets and Yankees are at home this week, at least the early part of the week. So as I pull up the schedule, and my apologies, I didn't talk about the weekend schedule on Thursday's podcast. I jumped the gun, so I'm sorry for not doing that, but I promise you I will do that today. Minnesota at New York today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. So the series will be done by the time we get to Thursday and the next podcast, of course. So if that means that the Yankees sweat out a 3-game series, I guess you got to deal with it and live with it. But if they lose 2 of these next 3 games, I don't even know what I'm going to say at that point. So that's what you got there with the Yanks. Now, as far as the Mets, I'm going to link a commentary video that I had posted prior to the podcast on my State of the Union regarding this Met team. And pretty much the headline says it all. Is it time to panic if you're a New York Met fan? And I'll just encapsulate it this way. I'm just going to talk about this series, and I'm going to talk about with the Braves coming in, and even though the Braves, a dead team walking, now they did beat the Marlins 4 out of 5, and people say, well, it's just the Marlins. And I'll get to them in a bit. But who knows? They tried to spoil the Marlins' attempt to try to get themselves in a wild card mix. And now they're probably going to do the same for the Mets as they come in for 3 games here to start off the early part of the week. Starting tomorrow, I might add. They're not starting the series until tomorrow night. But for this Met team, at this very moment, is it time to panic? I'll go as far as saying no. But boy, that shoe, you might as well juggle that with a chainsaw and an axe, because it is ready to drop. Now the Reds, is anybody going to be shaking in their boots for a Cincinnati Red team that, with the manager Terry Francona, and obviously one of the best in the business, and even with young players on their team, and they got Hunter Green, their starter, their ace, who had been out since the early part of June, I believe with a groin injury, and I believe he's going to start Wednesday. So for the Reds, who are going to be nipping at the Mets' heels here in this wild card race, as they're 2 in the loss, but just a game and a half behind. But when you have a scenario where this Met team has now lost 11 of 12 games, 7 in a row in the process, after getting swept by the Guardians, after getting swept by the Brewers over the weekend, and now with the Braves coming to town, And it almost seems to be no relief in sight, because then they have the Mariners coming into Citi Field over the weekend, including a game out in Williamsport with the Little League game that they have every year. So you're going to have a weird matchup. You would think they probably do it more with a divisional matchup, but all right, fine, whatever that may be. So here it is. The Mets and whomever it is that's going to take this day off. And if I'm, just like I said the other day, and I guess I have to say it one more time, if I'm the manager, don't think about baseball today. Don't. Get away from it. You've come back from a brief road trip, and now just decompress. But I will say this. Where is the leadership of this team? And it starts with their shortstop, because he's the guy that carried this team throughout the latter part of the regular season last year into the postseason. We know what Francisco Lindor did as being the runner-up to the MVP last year in Shohei Ohtani. Where have you gone, Francisco Lindor? It is time for him to rise to the occasion. It is time for him to step up. And even with Juan Solo, as in solo home runs, yes, Juan Soto is who I'm referring to, as you know. Although he has hit some home runs as of late, but it's not as if he's putting his imprint on these games in big pressure situations. And you can say that for the whole team, because with runners in scoring position, whether with nobody out or 2 outs, they have not delivered in big-time moments. We almost saw that with Jeff McNeil there on Friday night, but we know the end result. Tag out at home, and that was the game against the Brewers there Friday night. So watch the commentary video. I'm going to encapsulate pretty much what has transpired. But if you're a Met fan, to answer the question, is it time to panic? I'm going to say no. Although, again, that shoe is ready to drop with an axe and a chainsaw juggling in the process. And with a very tricky schedule on the horizon, look at that schedule starting Memorial Day as they have a 10-game road trip. I won't even unpack it. Go research it. Because if they don't start winning now, or having at least a good feeling in that clubhouse, on that field, and to get themselves back to right the ship, then guess what? The panic button will have to be pressed a lot sooner than we think. And even though our finger is that close to hitting that button, guess what? It's inching closer and closer by the second. And if they don't start turning it around and beat up this bad Brave team here over the next 3 days, and maybe take 2 out of 3 against the Mariners to get at least a little bit of a good feeling as a Met fan, then you know what? It'll be time to press that button. But again, we're this close from doing so. And if you want to hear more about it, just go into the description, click on the video, or click the link to the video on my YouTube channel, and please subscribe if you haven't done so in the process. I would sincerely appreciate that. You'll get a total unpacking and an unboxing of how I feel as a Met fan going into these final 6 weeks of this regular season, knowing that if they somehow, some way do not make it to the playoffs, there's going to be another nasty commentary video the day after the regular season if that's the case. And that is not only a threat, it's a promise. All right, let's see what else we got here in baseball. We got a few other things I could touch on here real quick. And yeah, if it can't get any worse for the Yankees, I know. Not that this is any big news. I mean, it's big news for the health of Mariano Rivera as he blew out his Achilles. Now, people are going to say, is he wearing high tops like Tyrese Halliburton, or low-cut sneakers like Tyrese Halliburton, Jason Tatum, and Damian Lillard in the NBA? Can't say that's the case, but sad that he happened to have that terrible injury trying to catch or chase a fly ball on Old Timers Day, which was Saturday. And one thing for the Yankee fan, Jorge Posada was interviewed and asked, hey, what's going on with this Yankee team? What do you see as an observer, so on and so forth? And he came out blunt in typical Posada fashion. You can't be friends with everybody. You got to have a chip on your shoulder. You got to be able to, not give a bleep. Now, he didn't say that, but if you read between the lines, and that was a direct shot at Aaron Boone. Because as a manager, he's trying to be buddy-buddy with these guys. No accountability, not telling people or not telling his players to sit on the bench, or you need to cool off, you're taking a day off because of your base running blunders or just terrible fundamental mistakes. No, he doesn't do that. He's not calling his players out. So therefore, it's going to be a country club, buddy-buddy, rub elbow type of locker room, and therefore, he's just letting them get away with it. And Posada says, that's got to stop. So there you go there, and then Boone gets ejected again, 5th time this year for arguing balls and strikes, typical Boone. But again, he doesn't seem to get it, but that's his deal when it comes to the Yankee team, where, again, if they don't cure their ills over the next 3 days against the Twins, then there is no hope for that team. Now, as far as other news and notes, I know Jen Powell, her debut, actually very good reviews, was the first female umpire to call a Major League game, which she did do so on Saturday. Had that doubleheader. And although it's a roving umpire, we don't know when she was going to be back in the majors, but I guess because the Marlins and Braves had to play 5 games over the course of a 4-day weekend, and for her, not many complaints from the Miami manager, Clayton McCullough, or even some of the other players that participated in the game on Saturday, or the games, because I believe she called home plate and third base, which again, nobody knocked. No, everybody thought, she did a good job. Didn't show a lot of sweat under the pressure, etc. So congratulations to Jen Powell. And let me tell you something. If anybody out there is going to say, they just threw her a bone, or why are we going to have a woman umpire in these games? I understand the NBA has that, but do we have to have it in Major League Baseball? My question is, why not? Are you tired of the Angel Hernandezes of the world? I understand he retired last year. Or how about Emil Jimenez? That game in San Diego where he was calling strikes at the eyeballs of the catcher when Juan Soto was at the plate. So yeah, there's a lot of terrible umpires. The CB Buckners of the world, the Last Diaz's. I mean, there's a ton of them. So guess what? I'd rather have a woman and a different set of eyes trying to umpire a game. So I'm not one to be like, you know what? Hey, maybe they just to keep it. No, nonsense. It's time to open up the aperture and get some fresher blood and newer blood in that's going to call the game the right way and not just try to rush to a dinner reservation after the game or to have to catch a flight somewhere. So that's what I have to say about that. And Justin Verlander, the nightmare year that he's having, 1-9 with an ERA, 4.5 or 5. He got his 3500th strikeout. I don't know where he's up on the all-time list. I know he's got to be, top 15? Top 20? Maybe I should double check that while I am on it. But for Verlander, who I would think this is going to be it for him. I mean, he's 42 years of age. He's had a terrible year. Let's see where he ranks. 10th pitcher in Major League Baseball history. So look at that. He's in the top 10. Kudos to him. Congrats on Verlander reaching that milestone. And as far as anything else in baseball, that is pretty much it. I know we could talk about some series. I mentioned about the Marlins, and not that I want to spend a lot of time on them, but if you recall a week ago today, after that series sweep against the Yankees and how they were at 500, and they were going into this week with a super busy schedule, 3 against the Astros at home, and then 5 in Atlanta over 4 days. So 8 games over a 7-day stretch. And how, if they're going to at least continue to tread water, listen, would you take 3 and 4 if you were a Marlin fan? I guess you'd have to. You would rather have had, would you have taken 3 and 5? Or better yet, how about a split? I'm getting my numbers all mixed up here. 4 and 4, you would have signed for in blood. That even if it was a situation where you lost 2 out of 3 to the Astros, in which you did, and then somehow take 3 out of 5 against the Braves, you would have said, all right, that's a 4 and 4 week, I'll take that. What you ended up with was a 2 and 6 week, losing 4 out of 5 to the Braves. Not good, so now you're 4 games under 500. So all that hard work, the big series against the Yanks, and then now it just went all up in smoke as now you're 4 games under, although 6 back of the Mets in the wild card, which still bodes well because you have 7 games against the Mets here over the last month, because you're going to play at the end of August and then the end of September to close out the season. So it's not as if all is lost, but you still have to leapfrog the Giants. You got to leapfrog the Reds, the Cardinals. So you still have a lot of teams that you're going to have to maneuver here. But listen, the only reason why I bring them up is because they are a fringe team. Not that I expect them to do any damage here throughout the course of this last 40-some-odd game stretch here in the regular season. But as I pull up the standings, as we know, AL East is still pretty much the same, where the Blue Jays have a 4-game lead over the Red Sox. That's what it was there on Thursday. Same for 6.5 over the Yankees in that regard. Now, the Guardians, I know they played better, and they're 5 in a loss, but 6 back. And the Tigers, who, let's see if they could start to play a lot better than they have here as of late, because the Guardians, they actually had a long winning streak snapped there yesterday by the White Sox, and they went into that. Now, they did sweep the Mets, and they won the 2 games against the White Sox, but prior to that, They had won 9 out of 10. So with the loss yesterday against the White Sox, and we'll see who they're going to play here in the early part of the week. But the Guardians, you got to give it up. They've played well, and who knows if they could even try to get closer to the Tigers. And we'll see where they play down the stretch. In fact, let me pull that up right now. What the hell? Guardians will play the Tigers here. As a matter of fact, they have 6 games against them mid and late September. 3 games at Detroit, the 16th, 17th, and 18th, and the 23rd, 24th, and 25th at home. Now, where they are at that time, now they could be 6 games back going into that game, but then they have to run the table. If I were a Guardian fan, I'd want them to cut that lead in half to be at least 3 back with those 6 games to play, because then at least you have some games to play with. You don't want to be 6 games out and you have 6 games with them, because then you have to run the table. So you don't want that. And that's for the mid to late September. So that's something to look forward to there if you're a Guardian fan. But they're going to have to continue to play at a high clip. Whether or not they could do that, we'll have to wait and see. We know about the Mariners and Astros, how close they are in the division. And terrible by the Rangers. I mean, the Rangers, here they were flying high. They were getting that much closer to the top of the division and even in the wild card for that matter. And what happens? They lose that final game to the Yanks and don't do the Mets any favors as they get swept by the Phillies in their building. So therefore, thank you, Texas Rangers. Now they're currently 6 games out of, or 7 in the loss, 6.5 back of the division lead. And then on top of all that, they are in the wild card, as I'll stick with the American League before I turn to the senior circuit. Rangers are 3 in a loss, 2.5 back of the Yanks. Guardians are just a half game behind the Yanks, but they are tied in the loss with a game in hand, so keep that in mind. So they are certainly right there with the Yankees for that final wild card spot, as the Yankees are 2.5 games behind and 2 in the loss of the Red Sox and 3 in the loss and 3.5 behind Seattle in the division. And then you also have, in the wild card race. And then you have the Royals, who are 4 back. And then I'm not even going to include the Rays and Twins right now. I know they're 5.5 back, but they're both 5 and 6 games under, if I'm reading that correctly. No, they're both 5 games under 500. So I'm not going to take the Twins and Rays seriously. And the Rays just got swept by the Mariners over the weekend, so forget about that. So that's what you got in the American League. National League, as I mentioned before, the Phillies are going to go away with the NL East. In my eyes, I mean, they currently have a 6-game lead and 6.5 in the loss on the Mets, or 5.5, excuse me. Again, I need my glasses, people. Why do I not have my glasses in front of me is beyond me. But 6 in the loss and 5.5 back. There are the Mets. Then you have the Brewers, who are 6 up on the Cubs in the division, and the Dodgers 2 up on the Padres. And I believe they play this coming weekend. I don't know if it's in LA or San Diego, but they are going to play this weekend. So we'll see where they stack up as we get to Thursday's podcast. And as far as the wild card goes, right now you have the Cubs a 1.5 games or 2 in the loss ahead of the Padres for the 4th seed in the wild card. Mets are 3 back of the Padres as they have the final spot in the NL wild card. Then you have the Reds 2 in the loss, a 1.5 games back. Cardinals 4 in the loss, 3.5 back. Giants 4 back. And then you have both the Diamondbacks and Marlins 6 back. And the Diamondbacks feasted on the Rockies this weekend. So now they've crawled back a little bit to the picture, but there's still 4 games on the 500. I only mentioned them 6 back, and I probably shouldn't have mentioned them if I'm not going to include the Twins as well as the Rays in the wild card race, with them being 5.5 back and 5 games under 500. Then why would I put the Marlins and D-backs there? But who knows? If the D-backs go on a winning streak or continue their winning streak, and by the time we get to Thursday to get closer, I'm going to have to include them. But right now, I'll leave them out. But that's what you have with the baseball. As we move it along, now let's get to the schedule before I pivot. Your schedule this week, for starters. Now, I don't know what to root for here. I guess you have to root for the Phillies to a certain extent, because you don't want the Reds getting that much closer to the Mets in the wild card. But you have Philly at Cincinnati, and I think that's for 3 games, not 4. I'll double check that. Thursday. No, that's for 3 games there. So very good matchup between those 2 teams to start off the week, especially in the National League. You have the Tigers in Chicago to play the White Sox. Pittsburgh at Milwaukee. Colorado at St. Louis. Arizona at Texas in a 2023 World Series matchup. Far from it, though. Boston and Houston, very good series there. Freeway series with the Dodgers and the Anaheim Angels. And remember, the Angels swept the Dodgers at Dodger Stadium earlier this year. So keep that in mind. And I believe Ohtani is pitching the third game. So that is going to be a game to watch there, as Ohtani has faced his former team, of course, at the plate, but now he's going to pitch against them. That's going to be, I would say, for middle of August, must-see TV. San Diego at San Francisco, a huge series there for the Giants. And that's just tonight. Then you have Seattle at Baltimore, Miami at Cleveland, Cubs at Toronto. And yeah, that pretty much rounds it out. Those are your big games here in the early part of the week there for Major League Baseball. So there you have it. Now let me put on the helmet and shoulder pads as I go through the NFL, some preseason stuff, and some things that I want to tackle, no pun intended. And for starters, this is to the people on my Instagram threads Friday night on a post that I put forth regarding Shedeur Sanders. I know there was a lot of people that responded, a lot of people getting at me, a lot of people throwing hate at me, actually getting personal toward me because of the comment that I made regarding not Shedeur Sanders the man, not Shedeur Sanders his character, not Shedeur Sanders his performance in the game, where he was 14 for 23, threw for 120 yards, somewhere around there, 2 touchdowns, made some good throws, etc., promising. Browns beat the Carolina Panthers. He went against the first team defense, etc. No, I didn't make any mention of that. Okay? And go back and look at the post. And I'm going to post this on my Instagram threads just for these people. So, with all that being said, the only cold water I threw on that was, it's a preseason game. Last I checked, week 2 is not next week. That the game against the Carolina Panthers was week 1 officially in the National Football League. Not only that, the calendar has not turned to September. We're still in August. And yes, even though a performance to build on, something that I'm sure the confidence that he certainly does not lack, but it's just been heightened even more based on what he did Friday night in Carolina. And yes, kudos to him. And I want him to succeed. I have nothing against Shedeur Sanders. I can't say that any way, shape, or form possible than what I just said. One more time. I hope he succeeds. I hope he shuts up all the naysayers. Everybody that thought it was going to be a top 3 draft pick ended up in the 5th round. So yes, I hope he flourishes. I hope he does well. But are we really going to scrutinize his performance in a preseason game and take that as gospel to think that he should be the starter or he should be a guy that's going to wear the gold jacket when it's all said and done? Absolutely not. The game is meaningless. And just like somebody had said on my thread, came out and said, well, it's meaningful for him. Fantastic. And I even gave that guy credit. I can't even tell you who it was, but I gave the guy credit for saying it in that regard, that the game may be meaningless overall, but it's meaningful to him. No doubt. I will not discount that. I will not by any means look at that as something where, oh, well, he's not going to be able to build off of this. No, he can certainly build off of this. And one more time, I can't stress it enough, kudos. But as I check my watch, it is August 11th. It's not September 11th. As I check the calendar and I check the schedule, it is not week 2 of the regular season in the National Football League. So therefore, that performance by Shedeur Sanders, one to build on if you're he and the Cleveland Browns and the head coach Kevin Stefanski, but it's certainly not one to build on if it's a regular season game and he's looking forward to week 2. So I don't want to hear it, people. And you could say, oh, well, hey, it's just a preseason game. Yeah, but you got to count it for something, or you got to... Nonsense. I made the analogy of the guy that may have been a high draft pick in Major League Baseball, and he wrecked spring training with 8 home runs. Does that automatically mean that the guy's going to lead the league in home runs in the regular season? Does that automatically mean that the guy's going to have nothing but success once he steps into the batter's box in his first ever game? Does that automatically mean that the guy is going to wear a jacket or is going to be in Cooperstown enshrined in the Hall of Fame? It does not. And one last thing on this. Let's say it was the flip side. Let's say if he threw 2 picks. Let's say he was 3 for 12, 21 yards, and threw 2 interceptions. People are getting at me too. Oh, well, if he came out and had a bad game, you'd be killing him. Oh, if he came out and had a bad game, you'd be cursing him out, you hater. Oh, yeah, that's why we don't pay attention to you. Oh, yeah, have you ever played sports before? Oh, yeah, what have you done in your life? Blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? If I brought the same energy that was a preseason game, why should we bother? The same energy would be applied here. Because it's just a preseason game. And I also had people saying, well, he probably would have been cut if he threw 2 interceptions and was 3 for 12. Are you nuts? Do you know what his last name is? His last name is Sanders. You mean to tell me that if he was 3 for 12 with 20 yards and 2 interceptions, that he would have been cut right after that game? You do not know football. You do not watch football. You do not dissect. You do not eat, drink, sleep. I don't even say it. Shit football the way I do. I've been watching sport for 50 years. And yes, I'm not a scout. Yes, I'm not in the league or anything like that, but I've watched long enough to know that if he blew that one shot, he was going to get another shot. We could go through all the quarterbacks in the history of living football over 100 years of guys who did not have a good opening preseason game that has gone on to have good careers or has done pretty well even after a bad game. Even if his name is Shedeur Sanders and was a 5th round pick. You mean to tell me he's not going to get another shot? I don't want to hear it. These people, they're trying to get at me. They can get at me all they want. It's not bothering me. And even though you can see I'm animated, etc. But the thing is, they missed the whole point on what I said. I'm talking about it's a preseason game. That's it. Didn't make a mention about Shedeur Sanders, about him, about his play, etc. So for those who want to continue to get at me, fine. But you're missing the point. Open your eyes. Don't reply, keyboard warriors. Don't reply to what's the saying here? Well, let me make sure I get this right. Yes. Don't reply just for the sake of replying. Reply because read what I'm writing. Because right away, it's just based on them just coming on the offensive and not absorbing what it is that I'm saying. It's like, you know what? He is right. It's just one game. A good performance. I get it. It's preseason. But still, you come at me like that, no problem. But all the hate and this and that, yo, you ain't going to try to do that here. And that's why this video is for you. So, now, as far as players getting hurt, and we've seen a couple of linemen, Rashawn Slater, the Chargers, done with a patella tendon. Landon Dickerson, the left guard of the Eagles, and this was during the practice. It wasn't even during the preseason game. Caught off with a leg injury. Don't know the extent of it, and that's going to be a huge loss if that's the case. And I know you want to talk about Cam Little. Now, his is a perfect example. Everything we should do with Sanders. Oh, it's preseason. Oh, why are you trying to this, that, and the third? The place kicker on the Jacksonville Jaguars before the half there in the game against the Steelers the other night hit a 70-yard field goal, which would have been an all-time record in NFL history. But what are the key words in that sentence? Would have been. The game doesn't count. So for those, again, with this whole thing of Shedeur, blah, blah, oh yeah, it does matter, it does count. That's where you get cut off. Because watching preseason football is like watching paint dry. It is the worst. Oh, the football's back. Oh, I can't wait. I got my snacks. I got this. Bro, you're watching preseason football? Then God bless you. Because you must be 18 or 22 or 23 years old, because by the time you get to my age, the last thing you want to watch in the middle of summer is preseason football. That I can guarantee you. So, let me get off that. Cam Hayward, now he wants a raise. And I love Cam Hayward. He's on my favorite team. Where was this energy at the beginning of camp? I mean, I understand he may be like the 18th defensive lineman to get paid when you look at the pecking order. And even though he's not fully practicing, I understand he's showing up and whatever. But could you have done this a little bit earlier in preseason? I mean, I'm sure you probably felt the same way when you woke up in the middle of May or in the early part of June or maybe during the 4th of July while you were having a barbecue with your family and you thought, you know what? Training camp's in a couple of weeks and you know what? I'm an 18th ranked defensive lineman as far as getting paid. I should be in the top 5. And I understand you had TJ Watt who voiced his feelings about not getting paid and we know what happened there. And DK Metcalf got his bag after the trade with Seattle. And Jalen Ramsey, the trade, even got a $1.5 million raise. And Jonnu Smith, and we're going down the list. But Cam Hayward decided over the last few days that, now I want to get a raise too, and I'm not going to practice as much. Now, I'd expect him to be there come opening snap at MetLife against the Jets, but the timing of all this? Listen, he can do what he wants. He is an all-pro, lifelong Steeler, Walter Payton Man of the Year, etc. And I love him. But now, that's what I got with the NFL, people. Let me move it along here as I lace up the high tops, NBA, couple of quickies. The schedule has come out, and of course, the two notables that you want to look at with the schedule is opening night and Christmas Day. Now, we can look at the schedule as far as ESPN, ABC, even NBC for that matter. Amazon Prime, they're going to also have games, as we know. TNT have exited stage left. But the first thing that just blows you away, if you're an NBA fan, or even a good sports fan that's curious, oh, wow, what are the games on Christmas Day, which gets swallowed up by the NFLs, we know. They can't help themselves. And on top of all that, the opening night, because you know that the reigning champ is going to have a game where they raise the banner, get the rings, etc. So you know OKC's involved. So with OKC involved, who's the opponent? It's probably somebody out in the West, right? Maybe Dallas, maybe a team that they played in the postseason. Can't be Indiana, right? That's too soon for them to play because I'm sure they're going to show their games throughout the course of the season when the NBA Finals rematch, whether it be on ESPN, ABC, or last year it would have been TNT. This year it'll probably be NBC or maybe Amazon Prime. Who knows? But yes, you're going to have the Houston Rockets with Kevin Durant. They're going to go into OKC opening night. So although he's been back there several times, the former draftee of the Seattle Supersonics before them moving to Oklahoma City. So you're going to have Houston go into OKC where the banner's raised and the rings will be on the fingers, flossing, etc. So you have the opening game there. What's the nightcap? You know it's going to be a Laker game. And if it's going to be a Laker game, why not throw Steph Curry in there? So another Warrior-Laker game to start off your season. And you know they're going to try to milk that to the bone because we don't know how many more years LeBron's going to play. Granted, he's going into his 23rd season in the NBA, which is just unfathomable to think. But for Curry, LeBron, they're going to try to host those games. They're going to try to put them on any network as long as they're both in the league. And then on Christmas Day, here you go, people. This is where the West is won because we all know the East is a far cry from what the West is. And the schedule shows it. Not only opening night, the two matchups are all Western Conference opponents. Your Christmas Day games always starts off at the Garden. And thankfully the Knicks are good because if the Knicks were bad, they probably would have gotten off that game. You have the Cavaliers going into Madison Square Garden, high noon, Christmas Day, followed up by San Antonio at OKC. So you have Wemby going up against the defending champs. Then you have Houston at LA, shocker there. Obviously no Golden State Lakers, but you will have Kevin Durant, the old guard, going up against LeBron. Follow that by Dallas at Golden State. So, of course, Klay Thompson going back to the Bay Area, which we've seen that movie before, of course, when he was on the Mavericks last year. But, again, another great reunion. We know what Klay has meant to the Warrior fans, the faithful, the championships, etc. So you have Dallas at Golden State and Cooper Flag as well. Then the nightcap, Minnesota at Denver, as they've banged heads over the last couple of years, where you have Nikola Jokic, where you have Anthony Edwards, and those are your 5 games there on Christmas Day. So when you tally it all up with the opening night and Christmas Day, the 7 games, think about this. 6 of them are all in the Western Conference, where the 1 is in the East. And that just goes to show you. Now, of course, you're going to see some Eastern Conference games throughout the course of the season. But right now, the NBA knows they're going to want to put the Western Conference and jam it down your throat. But it's going to be very difficult to do so, even with no Jason Tatum, no Tyrese Halliburton, and who knows what the Sixers are going to be once we get to the start of the season. Yeah, Milwaukee should fare well. You don't even see them on Christmas Day. So even Giannis, as big as he is and being the staple there for the Milwaukee Bucks, he is nowhere near the opening night or Christmas Day schedule. Obviously, we don't know what Orlando's going to be. We certainly don't know what Miami's going to be. Cleveland, can they even come close to what they did the year before? Knicks, yeah, they'll be good. And maybe the team that comes out of the East when it's all said and done. But other than that, you talk about a complete shift where the West has won the NBA schedule so far. And then you have Joe Mazzulla signing an extension with the Celtics. No surprise there. Now, the terms weren't disclosed as far as the length of contract and the amount, but he's not going anywhere. I'm sure it's probably, if I had to take a guess, maybe they gave him 3 years. Now, I don't know if that's after this year. Was he a lame duck coming into this year? I should probably know that. And quite frankly, when you think about it, maybe they gave him a 4-year deal after the whole fiasco with Ime Udoka. So this would have been forthcoming his 4th year, considering his first year he went to a conference final and lost, won the finals in his second year, and then obviously we saw it happen then with Tatum blowing out his Achilles and losing in the conference semis. So I'm sure they gave him 3 more years, so 4 more years, and maybe at the cost, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But Mazzulla will be part of the fold there with the Celtics over the next few years. And as far as the W goes, as in WNBA, now for the last few weeks I talked a lot about the Lynx and the Liberty. They played a couple of weeks ago in Minnesota for the first time this year, and without Breanna Stewart, the Lynx were victorious in a 193 game, and even though no Breanna Stewart, and you also had a scenario where the Lynx were missing one of their best players as well, but yesterday afternoon in a nationally televised game where the Liberty had a lead in the third quarter, and even though it was looking like the Liberty were going to revenge that loss from earlier this year, or really over a couple of weeks ago when they lost in Minnesota, and all of a sudden, the Lynx turned on the Jets at a 24-7 run where they led by 9 going into the fourth quarter and went going away 83-71. So, with Kayla McBride leading the way with 18, and DeJounte Carrington, who they got in a trade with Dallas, contributing and chipping in 15 points, part of that big run there in the second half. Right now, the Lynx look like the team to beat. And I understand that both the Lynx and the Liberty aren't whole. I understand that, but even though Breanna Stewart has said that she's probably going to come back at the end of August, which would be perfect timing to close out the season. Hopefully she remains healthy as they try to defend their title. But with the Lynx, what is their record? 27-5, and they're going to play them again in Minnesota this coming Saturday, where the Liberty are going to go on a West Coast trip, so they're going to have a couple of games before they go to Minnesota to play there Saturday. And then after the game Saturday, they're going to play a home-and-home Tuesday back at the Barclays Center to wrap up this little mini-series. Now, it's more of a mini-series for the Lynx because they don't have any games between yesterday and their next matchup against the Liberty on Saturday. So to them, this is more of a mini-series in season, best of 3. But what we've seen so far, the Lynx are far superior. And we understand that the Liberty is still very good, and maybe we'll see them when it's all said and done in the final. But Phoenix, who are right there nipping at their heels, and Phoenix, you had a historic performance there by Alyssa Thomas, who got her 3rd straight triple-double there on Thursday night. And I don't know if she had a 4th one. I don't think that was the case. I should have looked that up before I came on. But I know she's the first player to record 3 straight triple-doubles for the Mercury as they're trying to see them neck and neck in the standings overall when it comes to the WNBA. But the Lynx look like they're a team on a mission this year. And that's not to say that if they do lose to the Liberty in these next 2 games that, maybe there'll be some doubt creeping in the head of the Lynx fan whether or not that they're going to be on that fast track back to a WNBA final and win the whole thing that they were unable to do last year. Obviously, that's for well down the road, but as of right now, right, going back earlier with the Brewers Mariners, are they peaking too soon, whatever. But there's some big separation between the Lynx and the second place team right now is the Liberty. And they've shown in these 2 games against the Liberty how they've been able to beat them pretty handily. So just something to keep an eye on as they'll play this coming weekend. And then you had a couple of key injuries with the Indiana Fever, who still do not have Caitlin Clark back in the mix as she's still nursing those groin hamstring injuries. Well, you have Sydney Colson done with a torn left ACL, and Ari McDonald, who has a broken bone in her right foot, done for the season. I know Indiana's trying to be one of those teams that get into the playoffs, and they actually have played well without Clark in the lineup. I know they've hit the skids here as of late, but that's going to be the one storyline moving forward, whether or not they're going to qualify for the postseason, even more so, whether or not Clark gets back before the end of the regular season to kind of see if they could get in gear to maybe make it into the playoffs and hopefully have a run in them. But they're not going to have those 2 players in Sydney Colson and Ari McDonald as they're done with those injuries. So we'll have to wait and see whether or not Caitlin Clark's going to come back whole. And then you have Aja Wilson, who is the first player in WNBA history to record a 30-20 game, as she did that against the Connecticut Sun yesterday. And we know Aja Wilson is an all-timer, back-to-back championships, MVPs, etc. And for her to put up those numbers, now she has done 30 and 15, but never 30-20 has ever been done in the sport. Well, she's the first one to do so. Congratulations to her. And as far as the W overall, I said it again. I said it before and I'll say it again. The Lynx look like to be the team to beat here. And I understand the Liberty, also the Dream. I got to throw them in the mix. They're both tied at 20 and 11, where the Mercury are behind them a game in the standings at 19 and 12. And that is by the league. If I broke it up by conference, you have Liberty, Dream, Fever. And I should know how this works. And the Dream have won 5 in a row, I might add. I would think, the top 4 teams in each, I don't think it's the top 2. It used to be that. And this is me trying to get into the WNBA a little bit more, people. So, as I mentioned, I put up a commentary video about that. You can check that out on the YouTube channel as well. But I would think it's probably the top 4, where the Mystics are under 500 at 14 and 17. And then the top 4 out west, you'll have your conference semifinal, then your conference final, then obviously the WNBA finals. I think that's how it goes. Maybe it was a best of 3, and then best of 7, however it may be. But let's see how it plays out. Mercury right now looks to be in good stead there. And it could go up against the Aces because I believe it's a 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3. I think that's how it would be seeded once the regular season's over. But I'll get myself acclimated. I'll get myself a little bit more educated on that. And again, not following the WNBA on a whole throughout pretty much my whole adult existence. And because of the vlog that I put out and the commentary video, as well as just trying to get into it more, especially during this Sports Dead Zone, there you have it, a little WNBA update as we move it along here on the podcast. And then lastly, as I lace up the skates, now, NHL, Matthew Tkackuk has come out recently to say, and he, of course, the Florida Panther forward, back-to-back Cup champions, the heart and soul or even blood and guts of the 2-time champion team. He has had this injury going back to the Four Nations face-off, where he's going to need to repair, I believe it's both a sports hernia and an abdomen issue. Let me just double check that. Yeah, he's considering a torn adductor muscle, which is right near the groin, and a sports hernia. And if he elected to go the route of surgery, he would be out for 2 to 3 months because of it. Now, I guess based on what the doctors have told him, just rest it. Perhaps he'll get better. So by the time training camp rolls around, which will be in about a month from around this time, because the NHL, their training camp is usually the 12th, somewhere around there, of September. So for Tkackuk, who, all right, after the celebration and banging the cup around and passing it along to everybody, I would think would have made a swifter decision on this. And obviously he knows his body better than anybody else, and the doctors know as well, where there is some severity to it, to where he could have had surgery, but knows it's going to be an arduous process, the rehab, the physical therapy, etc. But I would think if he's going to make a decision, he's going to have to do it soon. If he decided to, let's say, get surgery tomorrow, he's going to be out till, let's say, maximum November. Now, you're talking about missing the first month of the year because the NHL season starts, October 7th? So I would think, and I don't know if the front office is thinking that, it's back at Chuck, we'll get him back when we get him back. Or are they thinking, hey, Matt, can you make a decision here? Because you're either going to get the surgery, you're going to be out for the first month of the year at best, or at worst in this case. Or it could be a situation where if you're going to rest it out, but then it's either going to be nagging throughout the year, or dare I even say, could you get it worse and then be on the shelf even longer than what you would be? I'm surprised they haven't made a decision, or at least come to terms with an agreement to say, Matt, what are you going to do here? Because you want to be a team that's going to defend your cup, which they will, but they're going to go for 3 straight, and I get it that that's not until next spring, but to have one of your best players still on the shelf on whether or not he's going to get surgery, and here it is already August the 11th, I mean, can we make a decision sometime soon? Now, people can say, well, JAYREELZ, who do you to say? No, I'm not saying that. Oh, if he doesn't do it, he's stupid. No, I'm not saying that. But knowing that you've come off of a serious injury here, as I regroup. Coming off a serious injury, yes, rest I'm sure has helped, but knowing there is a possibility that you can re-aggravate it and make it worse, that I get it, surgery psychologically, to have to go through the surgery and the rehab and everything I mentioned, that may suck, but what would suck even more if you're going to be on the shelf 4 to 5 months, or may have to get surgery in season to where who knows what you're going to be like having to come out of it. And then let's say here you are in the middle of February, and then you're going to have to ramp yourself up to game shape, gameplay, etc. And then the postseason begins, and you still may not be 100% guaranteed. Something to think about, and I get it that here on August 12th in a slow sports period, where even though they've got some things cooking, but for Tkackuk to all of a sudden kind of, I don't want to say he's being wishy-washy about it, but he's kind of taking it like, in stride. I would think he's either going to have to get the surgery or just ride it out, but who knows? If he rides it out, the consequences could be a lot worse in the long run if he elects not to get the surgery. So that's just my 2 cents on that. And that will conclude another podcast, people. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, like, leave a comment on my YouTube channel at JAYREELZ, or also throw me a few stars, write a review on Apple, Spotify podcast if you just like to listen instead of watch the podcast on Spotify or on YouTube. On top of all that, if you want to leave a comment, suggestion, question, whether it be on the aforementioned YouTube channel or on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast. Also, JAYREELZ on Instagram. Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just a number. The old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I have to do, people. It's in the blood. It's in the DNA. If you couldn't see the passion or hear it, if you're listening in your earbuds or speakers, then you have to come back on Thursday, because not only do I have 2 podcasts a week, every Monday and Thursday, roughly published around 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern. The 2 live streams, or really 3, count them 3, Monday and Thursday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time, which is a good one this morning. So if you haven't watched it, please go back and watch it. The Wednesday live stream, high noon Eastern time. I have the commentary video, the Met one that I've just released prior to this podcast, and many others coming down the pike. The critique videos. I'm even thinking about doing some history, sports history videos, that coming through. Lifestyle vlogs. Not only to the sports fan in your life, anybody that likes content, period, send it to them. Take a screenshot, send it to me on the socials, to your family, friends, foes, frenemies. I'm the little engine that could, the independent podcaster, full-time content creator, doing this without any streams of income as of right now, but I'm going to need your help. So please participate, please subscribe, rate, review, all those things, because as long as I'm sitting in front of this camera and this microphone, I promise you, I will deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South... One more time, people. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.